First and foremost, welcome to ProCon 2021. For those of us who are used to doing this in Orlando, Florida, this sort of feels very different and not quite the same, but I will tell you that having watched the Open just a little while ago, I had a lot of emotion and tears, certainly of excitement and pride for everything that we've been able to do and bring to you. But because I absolutely do miss being together in person, but it's amazing to have so many of you with us here today. For those who don't know me, I'm Jen Mamlet. I'm the Chief Development Officer at JCC Association, and joining me from the association is Annette McCann, my colleague, our Director of Development. Both of us, you can find us in the chat if there's anything that you need throughout today, certainly over the next several days and beyond. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us. This is the FRD Peer Community Session and our first From Crisis to Growth, Fundraising for Financial Security. We had about, of the 3,000 participants who are registered for ProCon, there are about 130 development professionals registered. So we expect to see the numbers today keep going up in our session, and I'm thrilled to have you all join us. Please note that this session is being recorded, and we do understand that some people wish not to be recorded, and you could turn your camera off. So if you're comfortable leaving it on, we would certainly love to see everyone's faces and to feel like we're all together. And if for some reason this was not the session you intended to join, you can go back to Spot Me and find the correct session. We certainly aspire for everyone at ProCon, both here today and throughout the next 3 days, to feel part of an inclusive and welcoming space that everyone feels respected, safe, and fully included. And to that end, we encourage you to consider the following things. One, if you haven't already, please consider renaming yourself in Zoom to not only include your name, but also your JCC or camp name so that we know where you're coming from. And if you're comfortable, you can also add your pronouns. We have also, you'll note along the bottom that we have enabled closed captioning. You do have the option of turning it off at the bottom of your screen, so you can feel free to do that if for some reason it's a distraction. But as I said, if there's anything else that we can do to make this more comfortable for you throughout the next hour and a half, please don't hesitate to reach out to Annette or me. Before I turn it over to our speakers, and I will do that soon because we are so fortunate to have two incredible speakers with us today, I wanted to just share a few other remarks about ProCon. First and foremost, we are thrilled to offer this program and this gathering to all of you and your JCCs at no cost, thanks to our sponsors. Each sponsor that we have secured believes in the incredible work that you and your JCCs are accomplishing every day, and their representatives are here with us. We encourage you to please look at the schedule, visit the virtual vendor hall during the live hours that are going to be happening both later today and on Thursday. You can also chat with our sponsors throughout the conference, right straight through the SpotMe platform, and we encourage you to do that. Certainly today, I want to acknowledge one special sponsor who's actually sponsoring this session, and that's the Harold Grinspoon Foundation. And one of our speakers is actually from the foundation. Many of you know the Harold Grinspoon Foundation and PJ Library, Life and Legacy, J Camp 180, the incredible work that they do in partnership with our movement and across the Jewish organizational landscape. We are so grateful for their support of our conference and of this incredible session. Winnie Grinspoon will actually be part of the closing session at the end of the conference. And if you check out their virtual vendor hall booth on SpotMe, you will see a host of incredible resources and links, including a legacy giving handbook that coming out of this session, I know you're all going to be very eager to look at. I also want to note that in addition to our sponsors, we have listed all of our in-kind organizational partners, including JFNA, where another speaker is joining us today. These partners have lent us their professionals to be part of this incredible program. So we're incredibly grateful to both. So with that, let me turn things over in just a moment. I do want to just introduce our speakers for today. Arlene Schiff, from the Life and Legacy program at Harold Grinspoon Foundation, and Dirk from JFNA. These two speakers have been working tirelessly with me over the last couple of months to plan this session. We know that one of the most important factors as people were facing the pandemic, one of the most important factors that was really determining a JCC success was not how quickly you were able to open your doors or how quickly you were able to raise new funds, but actually how quickly you were able to access existing resources. Did your JCC have an endowment? Were you able to tap into that endowment? And I heard from many of you over these last months with questions about how to start an endowment or how to boost your endowment. And so I was so incredibly grateful to Dirk and Arlene for giving their time, their energy in helping to plan this incredible session. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dirk, who's going to get us started. And Dirk, off to you.
Great, thanks, Jen. Good seeing everyone today. I'm coming to you live from my basement in Denver, Colorado, brought to you by Jewish Federations in North America. And I just want to take a moment to thank Jen and Arlene for their partnership. Hopefully the session today will give you a new lens through which to view endowment development, and we'll share some tips and tools on the why and the how. And Arlene, thank you for pulling up the PowerPoint today. If you'll go to the next slide. I would be remiss if I didn't start by simply saying thank you. And I don't mean that sort of thank you for being with us today. Thank you for your work. From a personal standpoint, my Jewish life would not have been possible without JCCs. And I'm not going to give you the entire story, but my Jewish journey began at a JCC, and everything that I've had the opportunity to experience personally and professionally started there. So the work that you're doing today in creating future journeys is sacred. And so I just wanted to start by thanking you for being a part of this. And from a personal standpoint, I can never possibly repay all of the gifts that I've been given. Just a note around how we want to set the session up. We're going to talk about the why, and then Arlene's going to go into the how and where we start. And we're going to focus on a couple of case studies, communities that have been doing this work. And then there will be an opportunity for you to come together in breakout groups to talk through some of what we've presented. If you have questions, comments, please do use the chat. We will do our best to address those questions today, but you may pose questions that lend themselves to future exploration. So please, please, please start populating the chat. Before we get into the actual presentation today, I wanted to just start with some framing. Something to keep in the back of your mind as we think through what does it mean to engage in endowment development, legacy work, whatever term you want to use. So I tend to think of it this way. An endowment or a legacy gift is a fundamental act of faith. When we are part of helping our donors leave these gifts, we have no idea what's going to happen in the future, but we're driven by a belief in the future of our Jewish communities and of the Jewish people. This is more than just monetary, and I want to pause on that for a second. We're not just executing transactions. When we transfer our assets or help our donors to transfer our assets, but not their values, then we rob the next generation of these beautiful gifts, because it's the expression of the values that are at the foundation of the creation of these gifts. By sharing what we believe about what we care the most and from what and whom we've learned, we create ripples that are not bound by the laws of nature, but are rather galvanized by the unbreakable connection from the past to the future. We are all part of this. Everyone on this call is a beneficiary of generous acts of kindness made by those who've come before us. And it is our generosity and our work today that will give the same gift to future generations. This work is sacred and important, and we hope this session will give you the confidence and the tools to begin normalizing this as part of your practice. All right, Arlene, next. So we're on the moving from crisis to growth slide. So from that, we're going to move into a discussion of nuclear physics. There are two concepts that I want to talk about: fusion and fission. Both fission and fusion are nuclear reactions that produce energy, but the applications are not the same. Fission is splitting of heavy, unsustainable nucleus into two lighter nuclei, and fusion is the process where two light nuclei combine together, releasing vast amounts of energy. And at this point in the presentation, you're probably wondering, what on earth is he talking about? How could this possibly apply to our practice as development professionals? And again, I understand you might not get the link right away, but if we apply this to the concept of donor engagement, oftentimes in our practice, we are doing development fission. We are splitting the different parts of our donors into their subcomponent parts. And more often than not in practicing fission, we are working on a transactional basis. We're going to that donor for that thing that we need now, that event gift, that Maccabi gift, that scholarship for ECE, that camp school, whatever it happens to be, we're dealing with one component of our donor, not the holistic human on the planet that thinks both, what do I want to do now? And what do I want to see happen down the road? And I would submit that there's a tremendous amount of power if we start practicing development fusion, putting our donors at the epicenter of that process and integrating our practice in terms of how we engage them in multiple conversations over the course of time that can release vast amounts of energy. So instead of bifurcating those conversations, let's bring them together to create that energy. And we're going to use this as a theme as we keep going through this. And hopefully by the end of the day, you'll have some expertise in nuclear physics and some expertise in how to do the endowment work. Next slide, please, Arlene. Prompting question. So we're going to get into a discussion of the different case elements for why we do this work. But if you'll take a moment, and if you feel so bold, I would greatly appreciate if you would share in chat your response to the following question. What do endowment gifts do for our donors, for our organizations, and for our communities? What do endowment gifts do for our donors, for our organizations, and for our communities? Take about a minute, really think about the different layers of that question, because there are three distinct parts. And once you have a response to one of those parts, all of those parts, please do share that in chat. Because part of this too is we're building community together and we're sharing our own beliefs. And that framework of how we answer this question may lead to a framework down the road. So take a minute, answer the question, and then we'll come back to it. And I promise that I will not sing while you're thinking. Nobody wants to be subjected to that. I love the responses so far. Great. Excellent. I should have asked this question 2 weeks ago. I wouldn't have needed notes for the session. This is perfect. Beautiful. I think is maybe for Jen and for Annette is to capture these responses, because I think this could lend itself to a framework, a collateral piece for our JCCs in thinking through all of the reasons to make endowment development a priority for our organization. I love the response, fulfill a dream. What a beautiful way to frame this work that we do. We sometimes get lost in the technical aspects, but at the end of the day, we're helping our donors to dream about the future of Jewish life and community. Keep thinking through this. I would encourage you to keep thinking through this during the professional conference, because I know that you'll be exposed to different leaders and training opportunities. So that response may evolve as you go through the next 3 days. And I hope that you'll carry that with you as you go forward in the training. All right, so let's come back to the presentation. Arlene, next slide, please. So when we think about the why we do this work, there are 3 components, case elements to doing the work. The moral case, so the heart, the emotional aspects of this work, the values-laden aspects of this work. The business case, the head, the rational, the strategic. This is really critically important too. I want to pause on the business case for our leadership to understand. Oftentimes in my work in JF&A, I've seen communities begin to make a shift once lay leadership understands the business case for why to engage in this work and to make it a priority. And then the third element, which may be the most overlooked piece, is the relational case. So that the hand, the partnership that we have with our donors, and the power in the conversation, not the product, but in the conversation that we have with our donors around this, and the reciprocal nature of that exchange. It's not only what are we enabling donors to do for our communities, what do our donors gain from that process? And that relational aspect as part of our practice is absolutely critical. So let's start with the moral case for just a second. I'm going to copy a link in the chat. And just on as an aside, I know that JCCA will provide contact information for both myself and Arlene. And if you have questions following the training, anything that we can help you work through outside of this, please do not hesitate to reach out, as it would be our pleasure to support you in your work going forward. I'm going to post the link to an article that came out about a year ago this time. It was at the very beginning of the pandemic. So the timing of the article was quite striking. In a time where we were thinking of crisis response front and center, we were mobilizing, we were planning very short-term increments, we were thinking about what we absolutely had to do to keep our organizations afloat, to let our organizations serve people in need. There was an article written by a gentleman by the name of Dr. Bruce Powell, a longtime leader in the day school movement in Los Angeles. And the article was Endowment as a Moral Imperative. Endowment as a Moral Imperative. And just the title alone, when I saw it, caused me to pause, because I'd never seen this work that we're talking about framed in such a powerful way. Not as a nice to have, not as a side project when we can get to it, not as part of a campaign maybe once every 10 years, but a moral imperative. We are obligated to engage in this work, to engage our donors in conversations about creating gifts of permanence. And so when we think about it as a moral imperative, what does that then drive towards? Well, we have a duty. We have a duty to the next generation to ensure that they are given the same gift that we've all been given. And we are all inheritors of those who've come before us. So what is it are we doing now to make sure that subsequent generations have the same opportunities that we've had? Imagine if that duty, that moral obligation, became a framework for all of our development efforts, for our organizational values. If that was something we stated publicly, that it is our duty to engage in this work. The second piece, and I mentioned it briefly, is a demonstration of organizational values to empower and enable future generations to live vibrant Jewish lives on their terms. Are we creating the conditions through our JCCs to allow subsequent generations access Jewish life in profound, relevant ways based on their passions and interests? And what are we doing from a development standpoint to ensure that the resources are there so that they can create and shape a community of their own. So as a value proposition, standing to the community, this is something in which we believe. It's a very powerful message to our donors and to our communities. And there's a third element of the moral case. It's a recognition, an acknowledgement of those who come before us. There's a line in Pirkei Avot. You are not required to finish the work, yet neither are you permitted to desist from it. And I think that line is apropos of what we are all doing right now. We didn't start this work. We are continuing it based on what someone else did. And we are not finishing it. But hopefully, we are leaving it better for those who come next. So that piece of this is our obligation to continue what others have done before, and having the courage to put our donors, that fusion piece, at the center of the conversation, is a critical component of the kind of work that will carry our communities forward. This is our time. And all of us here have the power to continue the sacred practice of building community. All right, second bullet, business case. So before we get too far into the business case, I want to talk briefly about market conditions, because we can't build a business case without understanding our market. So briefly, our donor base. For many of our JCCs, we have the benefit of having a very loyal donor base who've been engaged with us over decades. Also, for many of our donors, they are aging. They are in a place in their lives where they're thinking about what their legacies are going to be. They're in that place where they're thinking about, what do I want to see happen in the future? What do I care about most? So how are we taking this time, given the market conditions of our donor base, and engaging them in those conversations? The philanthropic sector. We are not part of a closed ecosystem. We are in a market of all philanthropies, and many of our donors are also giving to other organizations within the Jewish community and outside of the Jewish community. And especially among universities, hospitals, arts organizations, those organizations for years have been engaging our donors in layered conversations about creating gifts of permanence, advising them and taking them on journeys to leave endowments and legacies that will continue in perpetuity. They've been sharing that message with our donors. Are we doing the same? Because when we don't, we communicate a message about what's important. And if we're not engaging our donors in conversations about building the future, then in the absence of that, we communicate the future is not important. So let's talk about the business case elements now that we understand a little bit about our market conditions. So from a business case, endowment developments, legacy giving initiatives, they help us to reach long-term organizational goals. If we aspire to make access to Jewish life through our JCCs a high priority, what are we doing now to build the resource base so that regardless of someone's financial circumstance, they can find a home in a JCC? Through early childhood centers, through our JCC camps, through our Maccabi programs, all of the myriad of programs and services. What are we doing to build sustainability so that those programs will be available for the foreseeable future? The other piece that it helps us do is it mitigates risk associated with an aging donor base. We are all now faced with the situation where, for many of our longtime donors, their window of annual giving to our organizations is shrinking. So what are we doing now to secure endowments from those same donors so that when that generation turns over, our organizations, our programs and services are protected? It alleviates that pressure also on annual fundraising as a source, as the only source of funding. And if we think about for your own situation, for many of our JCCs, we already benefit from endowed gifts. How much is coming into our organizations annually from endowed gifts that were left decades ago? And do we know that number And are we using that to frame the importance of endowment development with our decision makers, with our executive directors and our boards, to show how we're already benefiting from endowments? And it also gives us the flexibility. We talked about that leap of faith at the very beginning. We don't know what's happening in the future. We have no means by which to predict that. We can hope, but are we giving ourselves the resources so that we can be flexible, entrepreneurial, adjust as the Jewish community of the future evolves and comes into its own? Will we have the resources to change as the market changes, to change as our audience changes? Endowment dollars provide all of those resources and give our organizations the flexibility to be thoughtful, intentional, and planful when building for the future. And I know that for many of us, we saw that up close over these last 13 months when we relied very heavily on dollars that had already been secured in the form of endowments that were a backstop for many of our organizations, both in JCCs and beyond. So the third bullet point, the one that we don't always think about, is the relational case. How do we review relationship development and the role of endowment building? Now, we talked about the fusion piece at the first. Are we putting our donor at the center of our work? That's absolutely critical. Everything should emanate from our donors being at the center of our work. This is not simply doing what the donor wants, but rather requires a fundamental shift in terms of how we see our donors. I was given a great piece of advice once by a professional advisor that I had the opportunity to work with. And he said, archaeology before architecture. And what he meant by that is we have to go back or go deep to understand before we can build a plan. And we think about our donors, that archaeology, that process of getting to know who they are as a unique human on the planet, what they care about, who their influences were, it's a really critical piece of all of our development work, and is absolutely fundamental to our ability to engage our donors in conversations about creating endowment gifts. Because if we don't know or take the time to really understand who they are and what they want to see happen, we limit our ability to engage them in those types of conversations. So I want to go ahead to the next slide, and then we're going to come back to this. I think maybe a helpful way, and hopefully in JCCs, this framework of taking the Cheva lenses that were developed by the Sheva Center for Early Childhood, and taking a few of those lenses and using that as framework for how we see not only our roles, but our donors in the endowment development process. So the first one, Tselem Elohim. So all of us were created in the image of God. We're all sacred, we're all unique. How are we actually seeing our donors? Are we seeing our donors as tools, or as helping us meet our goals from an annual standpoint, as sources of revenue? Or are we seeing them as unique humans on the planet with a unique story, unique passions and values? And does our approach reflect this view? How do we see ourselves in this work? Do we have unique aspects? Do we have a unique role in working with our donors? And what does that then require from a practice standpoint for us to change how we engage with our donors throughout the course of their relationship with us? The second bullet, Masa, journey. How are we facilitating donor journeys? How are we planning engagement of our donors over the course of time beyond just the tactical of we have an event, we have a scholarship drive, we have the tactical pieces that come up throughout the year, but are we expanding how we see our donors and where we want to guide them over the course of time? It's the same approach that JCCs have taken for decades from an engagement standpoint, where we start in early childhood and take our families on journeys. Are we applying the same approach to our donors? Breathe. And we referenced this a bit when we talked about the moral aspects of our work. What is our moral obligation as individuals, as organizations, to engage our donors this way? What's the moral contract that we have with our donors to take them through this process, to engage them in deeper conversations about the kind of change that they want to see happen through our JCCs? Kedusha, oftentimes interpreted as holiness, also can be interpreted as intentionality to our practice. How are we bringing more intentionality and more thought to planning for those journeys, to seeing our donors as unique humans on the planet? Are we practicing fission, tactical, or are we practicing fusion, relational, with the donor at the center of the journey? And then finally, Drash, the archaeology before architecture. What role does inquiry play in the legacy giving process? Are we engaging our donors in layered conversations about their passions? Are we gifting our donors the opportunity to create ripples with their philanthropy? And we often take for granted that they're giving us something, but they also get something in return. What a beautiful gift as a development professional to serve in an advisory capacity and engage our donors in that conversation, because it takes an intervention. It takes our outreach to engage our donors. So are we using inquiry about who they are and what they want to see happen as part of our development process? So Arlene, let's go back to finish that slide, the previous. So to wrap up the relational aspects of our work, putting the donor at the center of our work is critical. This is not simply doing what the donor wants. I want to highlight that. When we move away from the transactional and we go into the relational, a couple of things happen. One, we communicate that each of our donors has unique value and make unique contributions to our organizations, and that they are special. And by taking that approach, it reinforces the relationship that they have to our organizations and the Jewish community. We build trust, and we establish ourselves as advisors in guiding them on journeys to creating ripples with their philanthropy. By engaging in the process, not the product, the process of deeper level conversations with our donors about creating endowments, about leaving legacy gifts, that in and of itself reinforces our relationships. And then finally, our donors, by going through that process and creating a gift of permanence, are more likely to increase their annual support, our dinner support, our scholarship drives, because they have a deeper connection to our organizations. They've made a gift that will create ripples, and they want to protect that investment. It's not about the gift. It's about recognizing the unique contributions of our donors and using the process of donor-centered engagement to strengthen our relations. And so they see us as advisors that they can trust and guides on their philanthropic journey. And we will be sending these notes out, but I hope that that framework will give you some things to think through in terms of why this work is so critical and all of the different case elements that we can make with our leaders, with our donors, with our decision makers, and making this a priority for our organizations. Now, for the how you do this, I want to turn it over to my friend and colleague, Arlene, and she will talk through some of the skill building elements that are necessary in taking this approach.
Thank you, Dirk, and thank you, Jen, for this opportunity. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone and to see so many familiar faces from life and legacy communities and many JCCs participating in our program. So why endowments? Why now? First of all, endowments used to be a luxury, and that's no longer the case. They are now an essential element of any nonprofit's long-term financial stability plan. And we've seen that in the last year more than ever. In fact, my friend Brian Klontz, who's a philanthropic advisor, would tell you that if 20% of your operating budget is not coming from your endowment by 2030, then your organization will be in fiscal crisis. So think about that. You all probably know what your operating budget is, what 20% of that would be. You want to multiply that by 20, and that would give you the size of the endowment that you would need to spin off that 20%. Some of you are there, some of you may be close, and others may not have even thought about it, but now's the time to start thinking about it, whether we get there in 2030 or not. The best time to plant a tree was yesterday, so the best time to get started on endowment building is now as well. There's a $59 trillion transfer of wealth going on, and as Dirk mentioned, so many other organizations have been speaking with donors about leaving endowment gifts, leaving legacies. And if we don't start asking, we're going to miss that opportunity to maintain the vibrant Jewish community that we're all privileged to be a part of, and really to secure the future for the next generation. And we've had this thing called COVID that we've been dealing with, and it caused people to feel vulnerable. It allowed people to have the time to think. In the beginning of the pandemic, more people Googled how to write an estate plan than they had in the previous 15 years. People are now thinking about what is important in their life, what do they want the future to look like. And isolation, I believe, made people value community even more. And that's a key role that you play in our Jewish community. So again, why now? Why, in my case, I always focus on after lifetime giving because it allows us to speak to a broader number of people. So why is after lifetime giving a powerful way to raise funds for your endowment? Because many people can make this gift. For most people, only 3% of our assets are liquid, money that we can write a check today, spend on rent, spend on housing. The most of our money, 97%, is not liquid. And those are the assets that donors will have to give away after their lifetime. So asking for an after lifetime gift allows you to talk to a broader group of people. It's often the largest gift someone can make. And one of my most favorite stories is from a woman in Charlotte, North Carolina. So in this case, it was a rabbi going to ask her to make a gift to her synagogue, but he went and asked her if she would consider leaving a legacy. And she said, Rabbi, I really don't have anything. I don't have any cash today. I don't really have any assets other than my condo. And the rabbi asked, he said, I know how much you care about the shul. Would you consider leaving us a portion of your condo? And she said, well, you know, it's divided amongst my 4 children. And he said, I know how important the shul is to you. And this is, again, after that relational conversation that Dirk spoke about. He said, I know how important it is. Would you consider making us your 5th child? And she thought about it. And she said, let me talk to my children. And she talked to her children, and thankfully they're all doing well. And they said, Mom, we know the synagogue is important to you. It won't really change our life, thankfully, if we get a 4th of the condo or a 5th. Go ahead and make the gift. The woman called the rabbi and told him, you gave me the greatest gift by asking. I never thought I could do anything significant for the synagogue. Thank you for giving me that opportunity. So who knows when that condo is sold, what the synagogue will get. But for that woman, it was a very meaningful gift and probably her largest gift. Also, through after lifetime giving, there's a variety of ways in which people can make a gift. And so they have numerous options, which allows them to structure a gift or a commitment in a way that is most meaningful and comfortable for them. So I know many of you know what an endowment is. So just as a reminder, an endowment is a gift placed in a permanent fund that spins off a percentage every year to support your operations. An endowment gift can be made with cash or stock today for people who have that capacity, or it can be a gift of assets that are in a will or a trust. That can be a fixed amount or a percentage. There are a variety of ways and people structure their will. It can be by naming your JCC as a beneficiary of a retirement account or a life insurance policy, or in some cases with, again, donors who have cash today, they can buy a life insurance policy and make the JCC the owner. And then there are a variety of ways in which donors can leave a legacy that actually provide income to them or their heirs. Nothing I know the details about, you don't have to either. There are plenty of professionals that can help donors who want to do that. So just a few myths. Many organizations don't engage their donors in conversations regarding after lifetime giving because of these myths out there. And I just want to bust a few of them for you today. So the first is that asking for a legacy gift will hurt your annual campaign. And as Dirk mentioned, this is a myth. In fact, there's a gentleman at a Texas Tech University named Russell James who did a lot of research, and he has found that when donors make an after lifetime commitment, they tend to increase their annual giving by 75%. And as Dirk mentioned, they've made this huge gift and it's going to have ripple effect for many years. And now they want to support you during their lifetime in order to make sure that you continue to be strong and vibrant. Another myth is that we don't have time to do endowment because we're working on a capital campaign or an annual campaign or a special projects campaign. Again, that's a myth, because as Dirk mentioned, you're already having conversations with donors. You're already building those relationships. And if we can layer in the legacy or endowment conversation at the same time, we're giving donors multiple opportunities to support us in ways that are meaningful to you. So we're going to ask you to type in the chat, and Jen's going to read off the responses. What do you think is the best? Who do you think are the best after lifetime prospects? What age and type of donors? I look forward to seeing your responses in the chat. Who do you think are the best after lifetime gift prospects, and what age and type of donor?
I'm seeing volunteers, anyone who has a connection to your organization, consistent donors over many years, usually 50 plus. I'm seeing a couple of anyone, everyone, 50, all consistent donors. We got some smart people here. The
Absolutely.
Ones who gave moderately for decades, annual donors, 10 years plus, 40s plus, loyal, consistent. It goes on. Women and couples over 50 without children. I like that specific.
All great answers and all right answers. The best prospects are not necessarily people over 65. In fact, in our program, we're finding that the majority of the gifts are for people 50 to 75, but a donor of any age is the best prospect for a legacy gift. And in fact, there was a study done in 2013 by Connected to Give that asked donors who had a charitable gift in their will what their age was. And the majority of those individuals were 40 to 49, more than any other age group at that point in time. Many people think that only wealthy people are the prospects for endowment gifts and legacy gifts. And really, that's not true either, right? After lifetime giving is the most egalitarian form of fundraising. And as many of you noted, your most loyal and connected donors are the best prospects. So we've now asked a few of your colleagues, Sarah from Boulder and Nancy from Stamford, Connecticut, to share a little bit about their experience in building endowments. So I'm going to ask Sarah if she can unmute and start. I can't see you, so hopefully.
Hello. Hi, thank you so much, Arlene. I'm Sarah Skirpin from the Boulder JCC, and I'm here to share a little bit about the impact of the Life and Legacy program on our organization. So we have been participants in Life and Legacy with the Harold Grinspoon Foundation. We are in our 3rd year of the program. And we also joined Live On through the Rose Community Foundation in Denver back in 2011, which really set the stage for us in building our endowment. In that time, we went from just over $1 million in our endowment to now over $7 million. So participating in these programs has really helped us. Our JCC is a little bit unique in that we have no exercise facility to help offset our expenses. So our development team has to raise 50% of our operating budget each year in order to cover expenses. So we really do see the importance of endowment here. It's what we need to lessen the pressure on our fundraising team, especially during years like 2020, when it was really unknown what individual donors would be able to do. Even still, we understand the annual fundraising becomes the most urgent thing in a tough year, but what these programs have really taught us is that we can do both. Like Arlene and Dirk have both said, Life and Legacy has really helped us keep legacy giving top of mind, so we remember to sprinkle it into conversations with donors that we're already having and into event remarks. And it's also provided us a really wonderful opportunity to engage volunteers who do peer-to-peer asks on behalf of our organization. So they've really helped us see that endowment is the future of our organization. And if you haven't started thinking about building an endowment yet or a legacy giving program, we definitely recommend it. And please don't hesitate to reach out to me and chat me if you'd like to talk. I'd be more than happy to share more.
Thank you, Sarah. Is Nancy
Yep. Hi, everybody. My name's Nancy Schiffman. I'm the Associate Executive Director of Development and Signature Programs at the Stanford JCC, and I really echo much of what was said already. We have always had endowments, but we haven't really focused on increasing them and really focused on asks, on legacy asks. And so we are in our 1st year as part of the Life and Legacy program, and it's been a wonderful opportunity for us for a few reasons. One, to kind of get our board and our lay leadership on board with the importance of legacy giving and really positioning ourselves for the future. There's a lot of training that we got as a staff and as a legacy team, and pass it along to many board members. And so that has been very helpful for everyone to kind of be on the same page in regards to its importance and really what role it will play in our ongoing conversations. We are in the middle of a capital campaign in our 1st year of this wonderful program. And, it gave us an opportunity to really structure our thinking and be more purposeful in our thinking and our preparations when we have conversations with our believers, with our donors. We've often sprinkled in the conversation of legacy with some major capital campaign initiatives that are going on. You always have to follow the lead of your donor, right, in terms of what kind of conversation you're having and how much or less you want to talk about. But we've planted a lot of seeds. If we haven't gotten yeses right away, we've planted a lot of seeds, and it really has opened the doors for us to talk to folks that we wouldn't ordinarily come to for other engagement, for other donor engagement. And I love what Arlene said earlier. I think one of the beautiful things here is that it really is available to anyone at any level. And it gives them a wonderful opportunity to feel like they can contribute, because not everybody has the funds or the means to contribute currently, but when they think about long-term planning and legacy planning, they may have those means. So we have found some very interesting, wonderful conversations, always in the relationships that we have with our believers, and our believers come in all levels of ability to give. And so that has really opened the doors to some great conversation. Being part, and I know it's not just about life and legacy, it's about endowment in general, endowment conversations. But I think being part of this initiative and it being a community-wide initiative has had great benefit in that many community members are Jews are often multi-affiliated, right? Our donors are multi-affiliated. So there have been conversations with folks that have already heard about the legacy giving initiatives and or have read it in our local newspaper. And so that the more visible legacy giving is as a community, the better each organization does. And we have found that that has been very true, that multiple people have endowed the JCC along with their synagogue or Jewish Family Services or other organizations, in the community. So it really has been very beneficial. And of course, we're always looking for, and I totally get what you're saying, Arlene, about setting ourselves up for the future, because I do believe that that is going to be a major portion of the ways to sustain us as we move forward. And I just want to say one other sentence about COVID. Here we were in our first year in a capital campaign, in a pandemic, and we thought, oh boy, this is going to be one challenging situation. And in fact, as I'm sure most of you have come to realize, that those who are donors and those with means, really the pandemic hadn't really altered so much that your ability to have these conversations. Oftentimes people have done a little bit better. For those who have done a little bit better, but people really have been thinking about their future, have been thinking about their creating wills. We've had many folks come to us and say, that's so funny, I just the other day, so it really is an important piece to add to our conversations, which we had not been doing. And so I feel like being part of this initiative and really being more mindful of its importance helps us to add that into all of our conversations.
Thank you. Thank you, Nancy. And thank you, Sarah, for sharing your insights with us. So we're going to move quickly because we want to make sure we have time for the breakout rooms. So think about it for a minute, but why do you think donors are motivated to leave a legacy? The number one reason is because they were asked. So we need to remember to ask people. As Nancy said, they're including this in their conversations now. It's become more of a priority. It's becoming more of part of their culture. The percentage of donors who make a legacy gift or an after-lifetime gift when asked is about 70%, according to the National Committee on Planned Giving. So the majority of the people you have conversations with are going to say yes. And as I think Sarah said, you plant a lot of seeds, right? Sometimes people don't say yes right away, but the more they hear it, the more likely they will consider it when it's the right time for them. So what motivates endowment giving? These two bullets were the top two reasons that individuals in that Connected to Give study that I mentioned earlier gave: a commitment to being Jewish and a desire to living up to values instilled by parents and grandparents. All about the values, all about the commitment. People want to give back. They want to make a difference. They want to be part of something larger than themselves. Some people do it for the recognition, and that's okay. They want to be united with others of similar commitment and values. Many people leave a legacy or start an endowment to commemorate loved ones. We are the wealthiest of the Jewish people in Jewish history, and many people realize that and want to share their good fortune. But most importantly, they leave a legacy or start an endowment because they believe in your mission. You've had an impact on their life, and they want to make sure that a similar impact is available to future generations. And as Dirk mentioned, the way we get to understand what's important to our donors is to ask these questions. What led you to make your first gift to the J and why? What moves you to be such a loyal member? What is the most meaningful experience you have had through your association with the J? What is it that you would like to see us continue long into the future? And I'm sure many of you on this call also have other questions that you have used to get to the bottom of a donor's story. Now, building an endowment isn't just the responsibility of the development director. It really takes a team. It takes everyone in your organization, all building relationships with donors, changing the culture, which involves everyone on the staff understanding that when they interact with anyone who walks into the J or signs up for a program or donates, that they're having, that's building a relationship. And I have this vivid memory of walking into a Jewish organization and going to the front desk where you usually would see receptionist or the person's name. And instead it said Director of First Impressions. And I was so taken back by that because it was so true that that person who was the first person I was interacting was setting that impression for the rest of my relationship with that organization. When you get to endowment building, well, if you need some help, reach out to Dirk or I will help you think through the different ways that you can build the team and work this into the culture of your organization. And also know that there's a structure in your community to assist you in building your endowments and integrating legacy giving into your culture. You don't have to do it alone. Your federation or your Jewish Community Foundation staff are willing to assist. There are other JCCs who have participated in the Life and Legacy program or other endowment building efforts. There are professional advisors in your community who are also great resources. And then of course, there's Jen and the other staff at the JCC Association. So where do you start? The first thing you want to do is know that this isn't a sprint. This is a marathon, right? You're going to take it slow and steady. And Nancy and Sarah mentioned the Life and Legacy program through the Harold Grinspoon Foundation. It's a 4-year curriculum because we know it takes time to change a culture. So go into it knowing things aren't going to change overnight. You want to get your buy-in from your CEO and your chair. You want to make sure that they support endowment building as a priority. Dirk shared to share with them how much money is already flowing into your organizational budget from your endowment as a place to start. You want to educate your leadership, your executive leadership, your board leadership on the importance of endowment building. You want to educate your staff. You want to integrate endowment development and legacy giving into any professional development training and build internal capacity. Again, you want to look at your donor base. At Life and Legacy, we consider a loyal donor anyone who's been connected to you for 5 or more years. Those are the individuals who are most likely to make a gift. Set goals. Keep yourself accountable. In our program, in the first 2 years, we set a goal of 18 legacy commitments each year, a minimum of 18, and many communities get to 25. But if you set a goal, you're most likely to reach it. Establish data points. What information do you need to evaluate your progress? How are you going to start? Where are you going to focus your efforts? And then establish a reporting system. Consistent, standardized reporting on endowment development. Share this information just like you do about your annual campaign or your capital campaign. Share your endowment information with your leadership on an ongoing basis, not once a year when you might give an investment committee report, but every month. And as Jen mentioned, if you go to the HGF sponsor site, we have developed this little handbook called Legacy Giving, and you can get a PDF of it there, and it gives you some other tips. So we're going to take about 10 or 15 minutes to randomly assign you into breakout rooms. So you have an opportunity to meet some of your colleagues and discuss these questions, which we will type in the chat and also broadcast into your room. We'd like you to have somebody in your group jot down the highlights of your discussion. Jen will use this information to inform ongoing training on this topic. And when you return from the breakout rooms, Jen's email will be in the chat. So whoever is the note taker in each room can email her their notes. So we're going to have Annette invite you to join your breakout room, and then we'll come back in about 10 or 15 minutes and wrap up the session.
Welcome back. I think some people are still coming back from our breakout groups. Hopefully you had some time to at least start the conversation or wrestle with some of the things that we shared earlier, these overlapping concepts, putting donors at the center of our journey, types of donors that we might look to engage. And rather than having you share out from your breakout groups, would love to have you respond in chat to the one thing that you're taking away from this conversation today, you want to start putting into practice in your organization. If you can break it down to 2 or 3 things, that's fine. But if you'll put that in chat, and then if we have anybody who's brave enough who would like to share a response to that question, or anything else that has come up for you during this session as an aha, we're building community together. Let's share out. And I don't know if I can see everybody. So if you have something to share, just start talking and we'll go with it. Anybody, anything that they want to add, aha moments, one thing they're taking away? Don't be shy.
I have something to say. It's Betty Hum in JCC Greater Vancouver,
Go ahead, Betty.
Canada. The good thing is I was the only person in my group of 4 that was not partaking of the Life and Legacy program. So on that front, it's great that it's moving forward. But on the sad front is I'm the only one who's not partaking of the Life and Legacy program. So I'd love more information on it. I am actually new to MyJ, so as well, just 3 months in. So I think what is the barrier is just my own education and then getting our board involved, given we just started a capital campaign.
Yeah, the board is a critical aspect, and Betty, I think Arlene might be able to help address offline the Life and Legacy question. Other responses, please. Something new that you may have thought about, a new way of framing it, an opportunity to rebuild something that was started previously. Let's look at the chat. Having a committee, getting your lay leaders involved in identifying prospects, leveraging their social networks, recommitting resources. Yeah, it takes capacity to do this work. And much of that can come from within existing capacity. If we look at this as core and as a priority, rather than artificially growing capacity to bifurcate or to isolate this as a thing, let's pull it in. Let's make it at the focal point of what we do from a development standpoint on a going forward basis, annually and over the course of time. Those resources don't necessarily have to come from outside. However, it does take a team approach to do this work, not just our development professionals, but our programmatic leads, our CEOs, our marketing professionals. There is a role here for everyone in our organization professionally, as well as our lay leaders, to advance this work. That will be session number 2 that we'll do later this year on how to leverage all of those internal resources and build the team. We don't have enough time today. Add depth to our legacy conversations based on the moral, business, and relational discussion. If that's a helpful framework to not apply across the board to every single donor, because not all of our donors are going to resonate with a moral case. Not all of them are going to resonate with a business case, but some of them may resonate with one or the other. And so it's how do we find out who they are and what they care about in order to apply that, and that takes time. So what are we doing now to plan for those conversations to take place? The story of the con. So the example that Arlene shared earlier about the fifth child, about helping our donors think through carving out pieces of their existing plans for the benefit of the community. It's not just a gift to community, it's really a gift to their families, especially for our donors who are part of generational families who've been engaged with JCCs for decades and are still in those communities. What a beautiful gift to give to the community that will one day support children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, continuing that generational aspect. Last opportunity, anybody with something they really want to share? Yes, Emily, thank you.
Sure. I had shared in my breakout group, we were all newbies, and I've been at the J now for 2 months. But 30 years of experience in fundraising and nonprofit management. So one of the things in my last organization that we did was we created a society for our planned giving donors. And we talked about it in our quarterly magazine, every single issue. And there was a box, and it was a call out box in the magazine. And what we realized was people had us in their estate plans, but we didn't know it. And so literally we were getting manna from heaven, okay? Literally. It was just falling in our laps and nobody had any idea that this was coming, the staff, when I first started at my last organization. So asking the donors, those folks who have already included you, if they would self-identify. And a lot of times they don't. And the reason is they want to be left alone. They've got you in there. They don't want to be pestered. And so somehow you've got to promise them that you won't pester them, but that you want to know for future planning or whatever you come up with, okay, whatever reason you come up with, but come up with a good one and put it out there for your membership and the community.
There are two. I want to bring Arlene into this conversation, but I want to also reinforce something that she mentioned in her remarks. And we've done these trainings, and I have similar talking points. And when we're dealing with development professionals, you ask them what leads someone to leave a legacy gift. You get all the responses about obligation and family and values and recognition, and it's the piece of the intervention, the ask, the act of outreach, the inquiry. Have you done this? Would you consider it? It's our work that really is the number one indicator. So I think that's part of what Emily's talking about. But Arlene, in your experience, both in the starting with have you made plans, and also the role of marketing, how can that bolster the work that our professionals are doing in communities?
Right. I always think of marketing like Israel's drip irrigation system, right? Like drip by drip by drip, and then it's going to blossom at the time that's right for the donors. But if they're not seeing that you as an organization accept legacy gifts or are recognizing, our tagline that we recommend you use is be remembered forever by the JCC with a gift in your will, trust. Right? You want to remind them that they will live on. And the benefit of them sharing with you now is, especially for you, you can say thank you. I always say, isn't it better to be able to honor and appreciate a donor while they're alive than to put a little blurb in a newsletter saying, we want to thank John Smith of blessed memory? Right? We want to be able to honor and appreciate our donors and thank them during their lifetime. And that's not hounding them. We don't want to go back and ask them for more and more money, but we do want to show our gratitude and appreciation. And by listing those who are willing to be listed and adding the one line, if you've already left a legacy gift, please let us know. Maybe other people will step forward as well.
I think the other aspect to it is, in addition to recognizing the gift during a donor's lifetime, is as advisors to our donors, is there a role for us to play in helping them to articulate the values that led them to create that gift, to capture those values and to share that with their peers, with their family members, because that transfer of values is as important as the transfer of assets. Other comments, questions, anything that anybody would like to share before I turn it back over to Jen for final comments?
I have a quick question, if that's okay. We're
Yeah,
just
go ahead, Nancy.
curious because this is also towards the beginning of this experience. So do folks have history with the continual relationship, or how does one set it up so that when I'm not here any longer and there's someone who replaces me, that the relationship continues to build? Because a donor could be 50 years old and give a legacy gift. And so there's many, many years between now and later on where they could alter their minds or not feel as connected, their family, they may move, they may life experiences elsewhere, whatever. So of course, the development people now continue to try to steward that relationship, but has anyone had success or a more purposeful, mindful way of leaving for future staff, so to speak, the ability to kind of foster that relationship and whatnot in a more kind of structured, systematic way? Just curious while there's many colleagues on.
Thoughts? Anybody want to respond to Nancy? I mean, I have some thoughts. I'm sure Arlene and Jen have thoughts as well. Anybody else? All right, so I will jump in here. So there's a small off-Broadway musical called Hamilton. I don't know if anybody's heard of it. But there's a scene in Hamilton where Jefferson and Madison and Hamilton meet in the room where it happens. No one knows what happened. Burr is super mad. And we oftentimes talk to our professionals, don't be Burr. Because if you win the lottery and you buy an island in the Caribbean, never to be heard from again, all of those conversations you've had with donors over the course of time, they probably go away as well. So part of and I saw this reference in the chat, building the systems and the infrastructure in support of this work also is a critical aspect so that we can capture the information, the narrative about our donors. Someone will come after us. Someone will do this work after us. So part of that investment in the future is what are the gifts that we're giving by creating a data bank that will allow them to continue those relationships. Wherever possible, if there is a live transition and we're moving on to retirement or moving on to great things and we want to bring in someone new, a warm handoff that's multi-generational in nature, if possible. But at the very least, it's that data capture. When we get back from that archaeology dig with our donors, what are we doing with the data? And is that systematized? I don't know, Arlene, Jen, anything to add to that?
I was just going to add also, that's why in Life and Legacy, there's a team of people, right? This can't be a one-on-one relationship with just you, right? The exec should have a relationship, lay leaders should have a relationship, maybe not as strong, but at least there'll always be someone who's connected in some way to that donor.
Exactly what I was going to say, that we want to remember that these are relationships. We all know the adage that people give to people, right? You're making that ask. The ask is so important. The relationship that you build with the donor is so important, but the donor needs a relationship that goes deeper to the entire organization. And the truth is, when you're having legacy and endowment conversations, they're already connected to other people in the organization, most likely. It's not going to be exclusively your relationship. So I would just say, along the way, bring as many people. I love Dirk, the don't be Burr. I'm going to use that. But that concept of not doing it alone, and it goes back to what Arlene said at the beginning, right? This is teamwork to begin with. So it forces other people to come along in the best way, professionals and lay leaders, quite frankly.
Great.
Dirk,
Any final
Arlene,
words of wisdom? Well, thank you for your energy and for your responsiveness, your questions. It's been a pleasure spending time with you today, and hopefully there will be other opportunities. And again, thank you to Arlene and Jen for your partnership. And I'll turn it over to Jen for final comments.
Fantastic. Well, the thanks will continue. Arlene, Dirk, thank you so much. Annette, I'm going to ask that you please put their emails in the chat so everybody has a direct way to contact. Remember that you can also contact them and see their full bios and get all their information in the SpotMe platform. Annette's also going to put my email address in the chat. If you would be so kind as to share some of those notes that I know some of you took in the breakout rooms, we would love to capture some of those ideas, and we'll be adding it to all of the great things that have been going in the chat overall. I want to say this genuinely to Dirk and Arlene, who put so much time and energy in working together to do this. I know that their offer for you to connect with them is real. Some speakers say it, you reach out to them, you won't hear back. With Arlene and Dirk, I can assure you that they really do want to be great partners, and the Harold Grinspoon Foundation and JFNA are such incredible partners to us at the continental level. But we hope this also demonstrated the power of these partnerships and what you can be doing at the local level. And Dirk can certainly be a great guide for how you might work with your federation partners and their development staff as you're reaching out to endowment prospects, because as it was well pointed out, people give to more than one organization, certainly. So in the last very short couple of minutes, a few quick announcements. Our next peer community session will be held tomorrow at 12:30 Eastern. The Zoom link can be found in SpotMe. Much like Dirk talked about at the beginning of this, I'm going back to looking at some of my notes, that shift from the transactional to the relational relationship. We're going to be talking tomorrow about the transactional to the strategic approach to all forms of fundraising. So we hope you will join us again tomorrow. A quick reminder that the virtual vendor hall will be open today from 4 to 5 p.m. And again on Thursday. We do hope you'll go and visit our sponsors. We fundraisers stick together. We know that it was our sponsors who enabled us to bring this conference forward for free to everybody. And we hope that you'll join us in meeting our sponsors and engaging with them, particularly during the live vendor hall hours. If you have a trusted advising session, that link will also be found directly in your schedule in SpotMe. And tonight, I just want to flag something really special that we're doing. JCC Cares is a first ever continental service opportunity that will take place this evening Eastern time from 5:15 to 6:15 Eastern. Everyone is welcome to join us. We're doing this in partnership with Repair the World and two incredible organizations, one called Neighbor Network and one called Vax Volunteers. If Seth Leslie is still on the line, very close to his heart and his family and the community in Palo Alto. You'll have with Neighbor Network opportunity to connect with seniors who are experiencing unprecedented isolation. You'll actually be able to call and talk directly. With Vax Volunteers, we're going to help with state searches to identify new vaccine volunteer opportunities, both incredibly important service opportunities, and we hope that you'll be able to join us for that. And before our peer community session tomorrow, which is the sort of official kickoff of the second day, you'll be able to connect with your colleagues at a Mindful Motivator starting at 12 Eastern, 9 on the West Coast. These are just fun little breaks to get you started. These are sponsored by Les Mills and really give an opportunity to set some intention for the day, quick 15-minute mental, mindfulness boosts to get us going. So once again, I just want to give my heartfelt thanks to Arlene and Dirk, to the Grinspoon Foundation for sponsoring this, to all of you for your participation and your words, everything that was put into the chat. We will make sure to save it and sharing it all back. And I want to remind you again that these slides will be made available and the recording will be available too. So thank you. It's great to see everybody and to kick off the first day of ProCon with all of you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.